Another Wednesday's come and gone, and I got some comics. Let's talk about them. Hey, welcome to 9 Panel Grid. This week we've seen skater punk coming of age tales, a social media dominated future, and the resurrective nature of the Phoenix and all of mutant kind. But we're going to kick things off this week with Detective Comics 1085, written by Ram V with artwork by Stefano Raffaello. So this kind of sees Batman coming back to Gotham. This sees that he's out of the desert. He's kind of tackled the asthma. He's taken control of his life again, and he's definitely ready to take control of Gotham once again. This has been an interesting tale here. This has been the grand operatic Ram V approach that we've come to know and love throughout each and every issue. This one felt a little bit difficult to get through, though. There was some narrative structure that takes place in the issue that while I appreciate, it kind of felt like it drew me out of it. There was definitely like a rhyming structure in a very poetic way that all of the characters were speaking and the narration was happening, and it definitely makes sense within the scope of the story. However, with this particular issue being kind of like just Bruce getting his team together, getting ready to take on the Orgums and take back Gotham, there wasn't a lot of heavy lifting that needed to be done, and the narration kind of bogged it down for me personally a little bit. Now, the visual aspect of the story was really, really well done. I really liked the artistic approach here, and we get to see a new take on Batman that we haven't seen previously, and I think it really pops off the page. The color work was done really, really well. I think that Stefano's artwork and his design work for the Batman costume itself was really awesome. There was also some other characters that come into play here, particularly Mr. Freeze, that I think are rendered perfectly. It just feels very Mr. Freezy. It feels like the archetypal nature of that character. So all in all, it was a decent issue here, but it kind of felt more fillery, and I feel like the approach maybe was something that took away from the issue as opposed to building it up like previous issues had previously. All right, the next book on the list is Midnight Suns Blood Hunt #1, written by Brian Edward Hill with artwork by Jermaine Peralta. So this issue sees Tulip, who we'd previously known from the Blade series that we had just read from Brian Edward Hill, and she's the arms dealer. And what's happening is that she knows what's going on with Blade, and she's obviously had interactions from the previous series. Now she must know the villainous turn that he's taken recently, so she's drawing in Danny Ketch and she's drawing in Johnny Blaze, and she's recruiting the Midnight Suns to either do one of two things: take Blade on and defeat him, or draw him back into the fold and bring him back to the heroic or anti-hero nature that we're more used to with him. This book is really effective. I was surprised because I kind of tend to stay away from tie-ins, but this issue felt more like a direct continuation off of the previous Blade series than a tie-in into itself. This very well could have been, the next Blade issue, just following the next arc of where his adventures were going to go, and I really liked that aspect of it. In fact, I liked it so much that I kind of hope that they give Brian Edward Hill a little bit more runway and say, okay, let's bring Volume 2 into play after the Blood Hunt event is all wrapped up. Now, the other thing on this is that Jermaine Peralta really gets to stretch and play with a lot of cool visuals in this book. There are a lot of action set pieces. A lot of it is narrative heavy, and that it's really just about, Tulip drawing them in and convincing them that they need to go help out Blade, especially because they have such a history together. But man, there are some scenes with Ghost Rider in specifically where he is taking on a truck, and more importantly, what is in the truck, and it is just an awesome scene to behold here when he's just like ripping right through that sucker. It's really awesome. It kind of feels excessive in all of the ways that a fun adventure action comic should. So I appreciate it. I was actually pleasantly surprised by this. But let me know, what are you thinking? Next up on the list, we have Rise of the Powers of Ten, written by Kieran Gillen, with artwork by Luciano Vecchio. So now we've officially seen the end of the Krakoa era. Last week we had the fall of the House of X. This week we have the rise of the powers of 10. This felt so much more satisfying than the prior issue. Now, the fall of the House of X ended with, it was a big battle, X-Men versus Orcus, which sounds great. Executing it was kind of a slog, though. It was a little bit of a bore because all we get was the battle. There's no resolution, there's no character work. This delivers on both of those things. This issue fully sees Jean Grey being resurrected and is one with the Phoenix again. And she's not just taking on an enemy, she's kind of taking on Sinister Prime, who has gained dominionhood. He has ascended to the thing that we were, hinted at, even when Hickman was still in the book, the things that both the robots and Mutantum were looking to get towards. It was kind of the final end game of everyone and survival itself. So Jean is kind of battling him through the space-time continuum. They're kind of in this no space and no time area where, Sinister is basically like weaving his way through time and looking for different ways where he can manipulate the events of history that have occurred to make sure that Jean will not be able to do anything to actually defeat him. So it's really like this cool chess match that the artist really gets to have a lot of fun with. I feel like there's a lot of cool aspects that are taken from this, and there's a lot of cool approaches where the artwork kind of just weaves this, this web or this crack, this cracked window nature of like looking at all these different viewpoints throughout X-Men history at the same time. All the while with this all happening here, we also have Professor X and Moira meeting, and they're really trying to reconcile their own individual failures along with the combined failure that was Krakoa and how this all came to be. And I don't know, it was kind of heartbreaking because I feel like not only is it the failures of them as the characters, but it was the meta failure of the experiments that was the Krakoa era of X-Men. It feels like there was so much untapped potential from this time frame here, and I think that the people that ended up spearheading the post Hickman era, they knew that, and they kind of leaned into that a little bit while also trying their best to tell a compelling story. And I think Gillen did the best work when it comes to that aspect. So, yeah, I was satisfied by this. I really liked this issue in particular, and I feel like this was a satisfying ending. But again, it's going to be mired with that untapped potential of what could have been. There's going to be what ifs about this series that happened in real life, and maybe someday we'll hear about what truly happened behind the scenes. But in the interim, looking at this solely as its own issue, I was definitely satisfied. Hey, speaking of Jonathan Hickman, let's talk about Ultimate Spider-Man number 5, written by Jonathan Hickman with artwork by David Messina. So this issue sees us kind of looking through the history of the Ultimate Universe as it stands right now through Harry Osborn's eyes. So we've kind of traveled with Peter and we've seen what's been going on and what's been taking place here, with him in his married life and him as a parent, but we never got to see everything through the lens of another character. It was really cool. It was kind of something that I wasn't anticipating and wasn't expecting because, Harry, we kind of feel like we already know. We feel like we know what to expect with that character, and we kind of feel like some of the tropes that are going to take place because of what's happened in the 616 universe. I'm pleasantly surprised by this though, because especially with the other issue, we saw a turn on the classic "with great power comes great responsibility" line, and I feel like we're seeing more of that with this issue here. Jonathan Hickman is doing things, with character that I haven't been able to really say that I've seen him do in this particular way, where it is definitely more character focused than sweeping epic. Um, I really like it. I feel for Peter. I feel for, in this issue, Harry. There's a lot of cool things that are taking place here with how he was treated prior to the events of Ultimate Invasion and prior to the attack on New York City, which left, devastation and multiple people that, we've come to know in the Marvel Universe no longer with us. And it's really driven him to be a new type of character that I don't think we've seen yet and been able to appreciate. It's also bringing in other characters from the fold that we haven't been able to meet yet, such as Otto Octavius, which is going to be super exciting. I think this could be one of those issues that we look back to as like, oh, they were really planting the seeds for a couple different things that are going to be coming down the pipeline. Now, with this being kind of similar to the previous issue where it was very much a talking heads type of issue, I think that David Messina's artwork really lends to that beautifully. I think that he has a thicker line, especially with his inking, and I think that he has a more chiseled approach to his work rather than Kaketo, which is the main artist on the story. But I gotta say, I'm really enjoying his approach on this, and I think given some time to breathe and maybe a different type of issue that maybe isn't as narrative heavy and maybe given some action sequences, I'd really like to see what this guy is capable of because I feel like he's gonna bring something to the table that we're not ready for. Is it Kaketo? No, but that's okay. I really kind of dig that. And with that being said, I kind of dig this issue too. What about you though? What are you thinking? All right, moving over to the world of indie comics, we're going to talk about Dawn Runner number 3, written by Ram V with artwork by Evan Cagle. So I feel like this series is developing into something that is gonna be special. This something clicked with me with this issue where I kind of stopped looking at it through the lens of this being a Rom V book and kind of just approached it as if it were its own book, just a kaiju mech story with some other inner workings that are gonna be happening in the background. And I think it just brought a whole new appreciation to what is happening within the story. So in this issue particularly, Anita is finding herself being drawn more and more into the link, the memory world that occurs when she is hooked up to the Iron King, the Dawn Runner, and she's kind of losing grasp on the importance of her real life and what has been happening in that real life and all the things that she needs to focus on, while she's hyper focused on the memory of this person who she gets linked to every time she's using it. In the background too, we see the manufacturer and the people that she works for are there's some dastardly things going on in the background. Basically, they have an understanding that she's doing this even though she's not supposed to be, and I think they're nudging that further and further down the line for their own purposes. Ramvi, he's starting to build on this book. It's not just a book about giant robots fighting giant monsters anymore. This is truly a character-driven story that is it's really starting to develop. We're starting to see some of the threads that are going to be working its way through this as the characters grow more and more complex, and we start to see some of the mysteries unfold. Now we need to learn a little bit more about the character within the memory of this Iron King, especially considering that Anita is living in the future. Seems like there could be more that is given to us here, but we're only on issue 3, and I feel like this was definitely the catalyst for the series moving forward narratively. On the artwork side, I think Cagle is doing fantastic work. It feels like so many different things at just the right moments when there are kaiju's and mechs fighting each other, right? It feels epic in scope. It feels like these things are towering above you, and it feels like every attack and every punch and every hit just connects, and you can feel it, and it's going to be something that just like feels like an earthquake, emanating throughout a city. But all the while as well, while that can feel that way, when we're working with Anita and she's kind of just, within the machine itself and there's no battles, you feel all the claustrophobic nature of her being linked in with this, and you feel the claustrophobic nature of her being linked in with another individual and kind of seeing life through his memories. But Kagel also has a lot of different opportunities where, the panels scope out, right? And you get this big landscape where it just fills the page and you can see everything that's going on. And he also takes use of negative space in a really nice way as well, where it gives the reader some room to breathe, basically. He's not afraid to use just white space and negative space as a way to kind of just like give us basically a reprieve from the hyperkinetic action that's happening here and kind of refocus us and bring us back to one as we continue the story. So Dawn Runner number 3, I think this has been the best issue of the series so far, and it really truly makes me excited for where they're going to take this. Okay, the next book up is from AWA. We have a one-shot, Death Ratioed, number 1 by Mark Russell with artwork by Vladimir Lassi. This was a really really cool one shot, and it was the another satirical yet very real and very grounded approach that we know Mark Russell loves to take, and that we love to follow him through that journey with. This story sees a man wake up from a coma after 22 years, and sees that the world is, basically governmentless. Where government was, it's been replaced by social media, and your livelihood is directly linked to your thumbs up and thumbs down that you might receive on every action you take through life. And it plays with a lot of different notions along the way with that. Mark Russell does a really masterful job of like keeping the absurdity high, right? Because it should be humorous, but it also should have a weight to it because it's a very real circumstance that we're living in right here and right now with, how we kind of give importance to social media and how we give importance to whether things are liked and how people react to the things that we post in this virtual world, and how that stuff didn't exist previously and it is, and we're kind of giving away that level of importance when it doesn't need to be there. um, eh, there's a lot of cool things that are being played with here. He explores some of the nature through a lot of different viewpoints. We see the people that have been living in this world and kind of just take it at face value, and they kind of just understand this is the world and this is what it is. And we see a little bit of the toxicity that some I feel like we're fighting back against in society right here and right now, but has kind of just become a part of the regular world. But it's done so in a way that is absolutely not heavy-handed. It keeps, as I said before, that level of absurdity high while keeping it still grounded. The artwork on this was also really fantastic. I feel like the pacing and the panel work were superb. It flowed through the story and it told just the right amount of story to keep it a one shot. Also, kind of keeping you enticed to say, man, if we ever come back to this world, I'm going to be excited to see where we're going with this. It was super compelling, super endearing, and a little bit frightening all at the same time here, but frightening with a glimmer of hope as well. So, if you read this, Death Ratio #1, let me know what you were thinking. All right, changing pace from the far flung future, we're actually going to move into the past now. Let's talk about Grommets #1, written by Rick Remender and Brian Posehn, with artwork by Brett Parson. So this story is all revolving around like skate culture within the 80s in the Bay Area of California specifically. And we're kind of looking at the world through the eyes of Rick, a kind of a teen preteen who had just moved from San Francisco up to Sacramento, and is, he's working through all of the things that come along with being the new kid in school and trying to bridge the gap between some of the old friendships he had and trying to make new friends within the high school. And we all know that's a really difficult prospect here. When you add on top of that that it's taking place in the 80s, there's all these other kind of, aspects that we need to take into account as well. Um, it's really fun. I think that Posehn and Remender are doing a fantastic job at conveying the expectations of the time frame, I guess I should say. All of the different things that were deemed acceptable in the 80s are on full account right here and right now. You definitely see and feel, if you lived basically through the 80s and if you were a child or a preteen through that time frame, it just hits so close to home. It definitely feels very real to what we all experienced during that time. The other thing too is that as a kid who loved looking through all of the skate mags that came out and definitely tried to skateboard at that time, man, this just felt right at home. It was fun. It was a slice of life kind of book, and it wasn't mired in some of the things that we come to see in books where it's like, oh, it's this meets that. It's a horror book, but it's also, this other type of genre mixed in. It's like, no, this is just a slice of life book about kids and their skateboards, done so in a very humorous way though, and I really liked it. Brent Parsons, I kind of love his artwork. I've been a fan of him for years now, and seeing his cartoony, energetic approach on this was great. I think that the pairing works so well with the kind of bombastic nature of the writing being so humorous and being told through the lens of seeing the world in the 80s, and also marrying that with the caricature style of his artwork is just like a match made in heaven. It works so well. And there's certain scenes in here where it's like where you see the guys like dipping into the bowl and working their way through up and down the ramps, and it's done so well. Like, you feel the energy, you feel you feel everything happening through the page, and it's fun because you see all of the with the characteristic nature of the characters, you see their expressions played out so well and so over the top in a way that is not jarring but just super super entertaining. I loved this book. I can't wait to see where we go with this. I feel like there's just a lot of things, especially with Remender working through a lot of different decades on Deadly Class. I feel like this could be a fun book that if it kind of, if people start picking this up, we can kind of explore a lot of different things with this book. I'm kind of excited to see where Rick takes his journey, and maybe we can get to the 90s. Who knows? We'll see. But this was a great number one. What were you thinking? All right, next up on the list, we have Pine and Merrimack number 5, written by Kyle Starks with artwork by Fran Galan. So this is the final issue of the series, and I gotta say, I was very surprised at how the previous issue had wrapped up, and I wasn't sure where we were going to go with this issue. There was a lot of weighty, heavy moments that I feel like needed to happen here, considering how the previous issue ended. Don't want to give any spoilers away, but I feel like it delivered on 99% of those things. The rest of the series has kind of kept a humorous tone, albeit it has really dark undertones with it, considering that we're working with detectives investigating murders, largely due to the occult and some occult things that are happening. But this took this issue took some time here to really work on just the character motivation, the character emotions, and taking some time with that. And I think that Fran Gallant specifically, while he's had a lot of fun with the prior issues here, there's been a lot of action packed things. There's been a lot of humorous things that have been going on here. There's like a 3 or 4 page spread throughout this where I feel like where we take the time to just kind of live with the weight of the things that have occurred in this series, and it really he really renders it masterfully. I think he does a really good job of conveying the emotions and making you feel them. Now, there are some moments that I think that they try to dial up the humor a little bit more, and there's some resolutions to some dangling plot threads. While they're not like inherently like you know vital to the story, I guess I should say, but there's some resolutions that wrap up very easily, very quickly, where I kind of just felt like they didn't need to do that. But I will say the main story arc and the main story thread wraps up in a way that, again, just like the ending of the last issue, surprised the heck out of me. And it made me really scratch my head and go back and reread this and go, oh, I wonder how they're going to play with this. And I wonder if they're going to play with this because I think it acts both as a very satisfying conclusion as well as possibly the launching pad for something new. I don't know. I'm excited either way because I feel satisfied with the way that everything wrapped up here. But I'm very curious to see how this kind of continues if it does. I think that Kyle Starks is going to be at Heroes Con, as I will be as well. So rest assured, I'm going to be asking that question. All right, the next book up is going to be The Six Fingers number 4, written by Dan Waters with artwork by Sumit Kumar. So this is the penultimate issue of this particular series, and I gotta say, I feel like we are definitely at the boiling point now. We've built up to this really grand epic scope of the story between the detective in the one hand and the killer in the six fingers. And we've learned a lot basically within this issue. So in this issue in particular, Johannes has kind of defied his programming, maybe he's defied what has compelled him in the past to murder, and I feel like we are learning more and more about the nature of why these murders have happened and have continued to happen, and why they might even continue to happen after Johannes's time. We've seen a lot of different character arcs kind of pivot and kind of take a turn that I wasn't expecting in this, particularly revolving around the artist that Johannes has kind of met and befriended throughout the series. There's there's some machinations, right? That like we're starting to understand maybe there's some motivations that we weren't privy to previously, and I think that this is going to really build up to an epic, finale within the next 2 issues here. One being the finale of the one hand, and the other being the finale of this particular book, The Six Fingers. Something is happening here. We haven't been given all the pieces here, And given a little investigation, we might be able to figure out what it is, but I feel like it's a compelling mystery that they've been building towards. Sumit Kumar, I don't think he's gotten enough credit for the work that he's done on this particular book. Um, there's been a lot of fun visuals that he's been able to really work through, especially as the series has built. In this issue in particular, we've seen really truly terrifying things, whereas in previous issues we've seen grotesque things. This has ramped up the tension and it's ramped up the fear that you're supposed to be feeling as Johannes tries to cover his tracks, all the while maybe try to pivot and work towards a different life that he doesn't feel like he has to follow the feelings that he needs to go through with these murders as the city kind of bears down on him. Sumit is rendering these things beautifully, all the while he's kind of like building in all these other things where Johannes kind of navigates, the inner weavings of the city and kind of does things that, quite frankly, no human should be able to. So it was a really compelling issue. It was a really fun, character-driven issue that I'm excited to see where they take this because it's made the killer Johannes kind of uh, a compelling character. It's made him someone that you kind of feel for, maybe just a little bit more than you would have previously. And I think they're going to wrap this up beautifully. I'm really excited to see what they do. All right, we're getting closer to the top pick of the week here, but we're going to talk about the runner-up. Now, runner-up, William of Newbury, #1, written and drawn by Michael Avon Oeming. I gotta say, I wasn't expecting to enjoy this book as much as I did. I definitely felt like I knew what I was getting into, especially having read or seen Michael Avon Oeming's work in the past here, specifically his artwork. But I haven't read anything from him, and this was a really, really fun issue. It kind of follows William of Newbury, the title character, who is a raccoon monk, and he is kind of like the township's exorcist. Maybe he kind of takes on all of the things that the church kind of defies and doesn't want to look at, and he tackles all the otherworldly, supernatural things that are happening, um, to the behest of everyone that is in the church that he's working for. Uh, it's a super fun book. Like it's kind of like it has all of the things you love about Hellboy, with all of the things that maybe you love from almost like Bone, the fun adventure series. And it kind of marries those two things together in a really fantastic way. The narrative itself can get a little bit clunky in places because there's a lot of different things happening. This is a big issue. And we see William kind of his inner workings within the church. We see his inner workings with some of his compatriots that he comes along the way with on the road to one of his adventures. And we definitely see his interactions with the otherworldly, the supernatural beings that he's, looking to expel. The rendering on here, the artwork is just fantastic. It is so gorgeous. If you've seen Oming's work in the past here, it's very similar to what you've seen here. It's gritty, it's textured. I feel like he understands the line work that is needed as opposed to the line work that maybe he would want to do. He doesn't over render the pages, but he does let the colors work in a way that I think is stupendous. His work on here definitely has a watercolor or painterly aspect to them when needed. But what happens is whenever the one of these supernatural things kind of take place, I feel like the watercolor aspect in the prior pages really make these traditionally colored pages pop so much more. And it just really makes them vibrant and epic, and it definitely, it demands your attention when these things are happening here. I just love it so much. Now, with his writing, I gotta say, I was pleasantly surprised. I feel like we're entering into this age of writer artist books, and it's been really compelling to see. I've loved when an artist can kind of craft a story from start to finish and is responsible for every aspect because there's no excuses, but also there's no limitations. And I feel like he's living within that no limitations world. William is just like such a charming character. Like you immediately feel for this good-hearted raccoon that clearly has like a moral compass that is due straight north and is unwavering. All the while, he's still a little bit naive, but naive not in the way that he's too trusting or too caring, but that he believes in the best aspect of all the characters. And it's very endearing because we kind of see some of that take hold within this issue itself as he kind of befriends a thief along the road to one of these adventures. And their interactions and what we're seeing, I feel like is going to be the template for some of the missteps maybe that William sees along the road. But I feel like we're seeing his good-hearted nature kind of take hold within other characters in the world and in the township, and it's really nice to see. All in all, this was a really effective first issue, and I can't wait to see where they're going to be taking this character and where the growing nature of the story is going to take place. Because right now it's an adventure of the week kind of thing. However, the church is not too kind to what he's doing, and I feel like there's going to be the catalyst for where we're going to be taking the first arc and maybe the larger story here overall. But I gotta know, William of Newbury, did you read it? And if so, what were you thinking? Okay, it's time. Let's talk about the top comic of the week. And this week's top comic of the week, Avengers Twilight number 6, written by Chip Zdarsky with artwork by Daniel Acuna. So this issue is the finale of this series, which has been billed as the Dark Knight Returns of the Avengers. And while that's maybe partially true, it is definitely this dystopian future look at these. I feel like this book does something different and definitely ends on a different note than I would have anticipated, given the way that this has been viewed. So this has seen the newly reformed Avengers kind of take the fight back to to the Red Skull, right, as he's taken control of the United States government. And it's shown a lot of different things here. This was a very character focused book. I feel like Chip Zdarsky, he kind of defied the expectations, kind of what I was talking to previously. He defied the expectations of the trappings of, we hear the Dark Knight Returns of, so on and so forth. While this is a dystopian future book, I feel like he brings a different aspect to it. And we definitely felt the darkness and we definitely felt the weight of everything that was happening in this future landscape previously. And it was just, it was clouded, right? It was a dark book. This issue in particularly, though, I feel like was the beam of sunshine, coming out of the clouds. This book felt hopeful. It felt inspirational. It felt super heroic in the ways that we need these characters to feel. It felt like Chip Zdarsky clearly understands the archetypal nature of every single one of the characters he's working with. They all get a chance to shine. They all get a chance to showcase what makes them special, not in the pages of the book, but to us as readers. And I gotta say, like, it was just so appreciated that every single person, like, there was meaning behind every action that took place. Both actions taken by the readers and actions within the story beats themselves. The other part, Daniel Acuna, his artwork has been fantastic throughout this entire series. If you have not read a single issue, you're doing yourself a disservice, because if you took every word away from this book, first of all, don't do that, but if you had to, you would still find a level of appreciation because his artwork is reaching new heights. He's doing things that I feel like he hasn't done in the past. It's the same Daniel Acuna that we've known and loved, but man, like, he has leveled up. I feel like he was putting something on display with this book that he was trying to prove a point, and the point has been proven. You're a master, all right. You get all the kudos with this. The energy that is built up in the fight scenes with this, particularly between Thor and Hulk, are just outstanding. They're so breathtaking to behold. And some of the character moments in this too, it's not all about action. There's moments where you just feel the emotion, like, like emanating from some of the characters, particularly Tony's son, as he tries to make some decisions, some very difficult decisions, and make life changes that's we didn't know whether, if it was going to go one way or another. I'm very excited to see that. I think it was rendered beautifully. And it just, there's so much heart behind this book, more heart than I think that we were anticipating with the prior issues. And again, it's heart and a clear understanding of the Avengers, their motivations, their character types, and everyone gets a moment to shine. This has been a great book. It's going to be an evergreen book. Do yourself a favor, get this, read it, because this is something we're going to be talking about come December and January when we're talking about the best comics of 2024. So that's what I've got for you this week, but I'm more curious. What have you been reading and what were you thinking here? Do me a favor, be part of the panel, leave me a comment down below letting me know. And hey, if you found any benefit from this video, like, share, and subscribe and do all that YouTube kind of stuff here. So thanks again for watching. We'll talk to you next week.